Hey friends, tonight I'm going to tell you a true crime story. Softly, you can feel the evening settling around you, air cool against your skin, the window barely cracked, the hum of distant traffic like a slow tide rolling in. A porch light glows on a quiet street, moths orbiting as if hypnotized. And somewhere, a dog lets out one uncertain bark that never gets an answer. So before you get comfy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from? And what time is it there right now? Now, turn off the lights, switch on a fan for a soft hum, and let's begin tonight's journey together. You step into a town that clings to the edge of a wide black lake, where the water looks like a sheet of glass in the dark, and every dock creaks as if it remembers. You move along the shoreline path, shoes scuffing grit, a path lined with birches whose pale bark flakes like old paper. It's late summer, the kind that still tastes a little like spring wet leaves, faint algae, the metal tang of a storm that changed its mind. You're here because of what people don't say, because of the way they pause over certain names, because of the way the hardware store clears its throat when the year 2001 comes up. Because in this town, the calendar looks normal, but time has a sliver stuck under the nail. You pass the shuttered bait shop, the cracked Pepsi sign, the bulletin board with curling flyers for yard sales that already happened, and a book club that never meets. A wind chime shivers and goes still again, like a whisper someone decided not to finish. In your pocket, your phone is warm. The screen reflects your face when you check it, and for a second, you think your reflection looks like it's waiting for you to ask the right question. You remember what the old police chief said in that plain voice of his. You don't solve the big thing head on. You solve the small thing just to the left of it. So you angle left. You start with the old diner, the one that switched to paper cups during the pandemic and never switched back. There's a familiar clatter inside, a plate sliding, a spoon tapping, and a stalwart coffee maker sighing with the gravity of a train brake. The waitress with ash blonde hair greets you like you're a regular. Maybe in stories you always have been. You sit at the corner booth, where the vinyl is patched with silver tape, and you ask about the lake level this year. The waitress says it's lower than it should be, then higher, then shrugs, like the lake is moody and that's just the way of it. You ask about the cheap motel by the highway. She shrugs again. But this time her eyes turn toward the window, to the reflection of the neon open sign, as if the date flickers behind it. The year 2001. A high school graduation party at the pavilion. A sudden rain that hammered the roof so hard you had to shout to be heard. A girl, no, don't rush her name. You let the story tell itself to you. You stir your tea, and you listen to the ice. A detail comes like a bubble rising from the lake bottom. That night, 24 years ago, the lake swallowed the music. The pavilion's fairy lights, cheap LEDs with a bluish cast, went dark in the downpour, and everyone moved under the eaves, rib cage to rib cage, fingers pinching cups. Someone said she slipped away to call her dad. Someone else said they saw a pickup idling near the boat launch, amber hazard lights blinking like slow, sleepy eyes. Someone said the vending machine by the restroom popped, and when they checked, it was empty, like someone stole not money, but all the sugar. That's the sort of town this is. People clock what disappears, even if it's only a row of lemon-lime sodas. You taste something metallic on your tongue and tell yourself it's from the teaspoon. The waitress refills your cup without being asked, and the steam curls up into a question mark that dissolves. The ceiling fan whirs a lullaby, and you feel the whole town leaning in, like it wants to be forgiven for not seeing sooner, for not looking longer, for making peace with what didn't make sense. The word they use on the postcards is serene. The word they use at night is hush. You let your mind move back further, not to 2001 yet, but to something older, steadier, and true in a way that can anchor you. The first 911 call placed in the United States happened in 1968 in Haleyville, Alabama. You picture a clunky handset, the curl of a cord, and the way a new number could suddenly mean help coming faster, like putting a bandage on the entire century. Think of that, you tell yourself, as you breathe in the diner air grease, coffee, lemon cleaner, and remember that help has always been a number we dial and a promise we keep. Some nights, promises need reminding. When you leave the diner, the doorbell gives a weary little ring that hangs in the dark. The streetlights throw down their cones of pale light, and within each cone, a moth tries again to become a ghost. The lake lifts a whisper to the shore. You walk past the library once, a church, then a Grange Hall. It's quiet, except for the snack machine in the lobby that hums as if dreaming. That same model stood at the pavilion in 2001, someone once told you. The kind that used spiral coils to hold the snacks. The kind that often got stuck halfway. People used to rock it with their hips, laugh, and say the machine was a stubborn old mule. That night, someone rocked it harder, but for different reasons. You move along to the pavilion. In the moonlight, it looks like a bone left to bleach. The picnic tables are stacked like sheets of plywood. The railing smells of wet cedar. You pause at the corner where the lights went out back then and listen to the thudding hush your pulse. The lake, the long quiet between facts. A small animal rustles in the reeds, and for a second you picture a hand surfacing with a bracelet on it. You press your hand to your chest as if to keep that image from escaping. You've read the old reports. The missing person flyer with an earnest school photo, the grainy security camera still of headlights turning, and the witness statements that overlap like leaves, each covering part of another. She left the party to make a call. She didn't have a cell at the time. Lots of kids didn't yet around here. So she used the payphone outside the restroom building. The one with the graffiti etched into its metal belly. A heart, a date, a joke that never lands. The call didn't go through. Or it did. This is where the story divides. Like a wake when two boats pass each other in the night. The sound of the rain in every ear made certainty a luxury. Even memory is a kind of weather. You rest a palm against the payphone's empty pedestal. Now just a square of sun-faded metal bolts. The town removed it years ago. A couple of quarters still sometimes show up in the dirt nearby, like coins that were spat back up. You brush one with your shoe, and it skitters, like a little moon, into a crack. Over your shoulder, the motel sign across the highway buzzes and flickers vacancy, losing its N, and then getting it back, as if the word can't decide whether it's full or empty, taken or alone. There was a truck that night, yes. Ask any old-timer, and they'll mention the hazard lights and the idling rumble. Some say it was a Forestry Service pickup. Some say it was a cousin's friend's F-150. The man who drove it, the one people don't name, wore a green windbreaker and a baseball cap with a logo no one agrees on. He banked at the local credit union. He bought bait at the shop by the wharf. He loaned out a socket wrench set and never brought it back. He was made of the same stuff as this place, sawdust, lake water, habit. Your footsteps sound too loud when you think of him. Here is the strange aside everyone whispers once the coffee gets cold. For months after that night, the vending machine at the library kept jamming whenever anyone tried to buy lemon-lime soda. As if some unseen hand froze the coil right there, mid-spiral, refusing to release anything that came in a green can. A superstition grew around it. Students started calling it the hold. They said if you looked at the jammed can long enough, you could see a fingerprint in the dust on its rim. It's not that you believe it. It's that you live here long enough, and you start entertaining the way a story fills the place's evidence leaves bare. You step off the pavilion and follow the low boardwalk toward the boat launch. The wood is soft from years of rain, your shoes leaving ellipses of damp in your path. A frog chirps. Somewhere down the road, a semi rolls past, dragging a long hush behind it. You think about evidence, not just what it shows, but what it wants. You think about the new detective, the one who came in 5 years ago, with sleeves rolled to the elbow and a habit of writing notes on yellow cards instead of in a notebook, stacking them like a tiny city on his desk. He jogs these trails at dawn. He buys plain coffee and dumps in too much milk. He once said to you, "Cold cases aren't cold. They're rooms with the heater off." You've never forgotten that. The water at the launch is glassy. Your reflection leans close, distorts, then resolves. Off to your right, a rusted trash barrel lists a little, like a ship that understands its fate. Under the dim streetlight, you can see scratches on the metal, diagonal marks, like someone dragged something heavy and meant it. You trace them with your eyes, but not your fingers. Some marks you don't have to touch to know what they mean. You hold one more truth in your mouth like a lozenge for the road back. In 1901, the Henry classification system began organizing fingerprints in a way that let police match prints with far greater efficiency. Even in this century, a smudged whorl can introduce two strangers to each other across decades. It comforts you to think of it. The patient looping architecture we all carry on our hands. The way oil and dust can become a conversation that outlives us. On nights like this, you use old truths, like ropes across a dark river. You turn back toward town. A cat slips under a fence. A sprinkler coughs and starts, scattering water in an arc that briefly glitters with lake smell. Somewhere a TV murmurs behind blinds. A blue light pulses at a bedside charger. You notice how the town holds itself, shoulders slightly up, like someone bracing for a name to be spoken. And there is still argument in the air, even now, whether the calls that night connected at all, whether the truck belonged to the Forestry Service or to a man who was between jobs, and whether a scream would have sounded any different from laughter under the rain. People here debate it like scholars in low voices, with loyalty braided to doubt. A town can be a classroom where everyone is tired and still somehow rapt. You reach the motel. The manager sits behind the desk, a glass jar of peppermints to his right, and a crossword half filled to his left. He looks up, then looks back down, like he doesn't want to be part of anyone's story tonight. The carpet smells like shampoo and a little like cigarette smoke from the days before the signs went up. You study the staircase. That's where the girl's best friend stood waiting the night the storm swallowed the music. She was holding 2 sodas, lemon lime and cola, and didn't know where to put them when the thunder got louder. She set them on the step, third from the top. The cola tipped first. The lemon lime lasted longer. You realize you've been clenching your jaw. You release it and feel the ache. A soft sound rises outside a single car coasting past. And you know this is where Act 1 leaves you. In a town that hums at night. By a lake that remembers how to reflect. Under a neon sign that can't decide if it's complete. You stand there with your hand on the banister, a splinter pressing a warning into your palm. And you whisper to yourself, this is where we start. Not with what went missing, but with how the missing keeps touching everything that stayed. And because stories continue even when we sleep, you take one last deep breath. The fan you switched on back home is still humming for you. The lake takes a breath of its own. Tomorrow, you'll go looking for a small thing just to the left of the big thing. But tonight, you carry this town gently, as if you're afraid to wake it. You return to the lake in the gray rinse of early morning, when dew beads the grass like a line of tiny lanterns and the gulls test their voices with half-hearted cries. You walk the boardwalk with coffee that's too hot, steam grazing your upper lip, the cup lid clicking as you sip. The world feels half-muted, like someone put felt on the sharp edges. You retrace last night's steps pavilion, restroom, the scar where the payphone once stood, and then you do what the old chief advised. You go a little left of the big thing. Left takes you to the Parks and Rec shed behind the pavilion, the one with the dented door and the padlock that looks like a knuckle. You can see where the town never got around to repainting. The green has peeled into curls, and when the wind lifts, the curls tremble like nervous eyelashes. You lean close to the window and peer in at a jumble of rake handles and plastic cones and a folded canopy everyone promises they'll repair next season. You smell motor oil, dry dirt, and the sour from a trash bag someone forgot. The lock has a fresh scrape across it, diagonal and bright, as if something tried to get out or in. You move on, following the path that snakes along a screen of reeds. Your shoes hush on damp earth. In the shallows, minnows shift direction all at once, like a thought deciding to be something else. You pause at the footbridge where a sign warns, "Careful, slippery when wet." It's always wet here. You run a finger along the rail and feel the film of algae, slick and alive. You like that sensation because it reminds you how time isn't only a clock. It's this slow green insistence that covers everything, patiently, equally. When the library opens, you're there. The lobby smells like paper, plastic, and the kind of carpet that has made peace with every shoe. The vending machine hums in its niche, newer now, but you still glance at the lemon-lime row. Pure habit. The librarian with the cheerful glasses recognizes you from other days you've come to read old newspapers and pretend you aren't. You ask if the microfilm machine still works. She smiles the smile of someone who has seen whole lives pivot under fluorescent light, then leads you to a back room where the air is cooler and the hum is lower, like the library has a cat purring in its walls. You lean over the machine. The screen. A pale, ghostly window. The spool clicks as the film slides, and you watch the town rewind. Parades, bake sales, and a state of the lake report with a photo of a man in a windbreaker that seems a shade too familiar. Headlines bloom and retract. Graduation photos in black and white, then glossy color. Then the decade when everyone's hair decided volume was destiny. You pause on a week in early June, 2001. A short police blotter item mentions disturbance at Lake Pavilion during heavy precipitation. Disturbance is such a steady word. You picture the rain like 1,000 fingers drumming the roof, and a slice of quiet underneath where something unsteady happened. You print the item, the paper warm when it slips out, and you circle the time, 9:43 p.m. You adjust your thinking. You let the pavilion grow darker and noisier in your mind. You let the hazard lights blink slower. You give the truck driver a different hat. You unspool again and find a human interest column from the same week about a successful coin drive for New Jersey's. The photo showing kids beaming, palms open, quarters glinting like small moons gathered for a new orbit. You can't help it. You clock quarters now, the way some people clock cardinals or license plates. Here's a truth you carry forward quietly, because it matters. CODIS, the National DNA Index, began in the late 1990s and expanded state participation through the early 2000s, building a grid where a single profile can light up connections across jurisdictions. That fact sits in your pocket like a phone with perfect signal. You remember hearing the detective talk about it once, about swabs kept in paper envelopes and chain of custody forms filled out in cramped print. "We put hope in freezers," he said. Not dramatic, just precise. You hold that sentence like the edge of a map. Back in the public area, you sink into a chair where the morning sun makes a rectangle on the carpet. The librarian passes with a cart of returns, and you think of all the spines that found their way home. You take out your notebook and write the names you always write when you come here. The girl who left the party to call. The best friend with 2 sodas. The man in the green windbreaker. The best friend. The best friend. The motel manager who loved crosswords. The ranger who did or didn't work that night. And the band kid who said he heard a laugh that wasn't a laugh. You draw lines. You draw a small square where the payphone stood. You doodle a vending coil and a lemon lime can for no good reason except that stories are mosaics made from both glass and gum wrappers. You walk the 2 blocks to the credit union, even though you know they won't tell you anything. You're not here to ask for privileged information. You're here to stand for a minute in the same air. The lobby smells like mint and thermal paper, a mix that somehow reads as clean. The receptionist taps a keyboard. The printer emits a little chirrup, and then a longer sigh. You scan the bulletin board, the one where people still post announcements printed on pastel paper. There's a flyer for a rummage sale at the Grange this Saturday, a photo of a missing cat who looks self-possessed enough to be fine, and an ad for a handyman with a phone number whose last 4 digits repeat themselves in a pattern that sticks in your teeth like a seed. You tear off a tab without thinking and tuck it in your pocket, as if numbers can anchor you. The detective with the yellow cards finds you at noon in the diner, like he knew you would return to the steam and the ceiling fan and the patched vinyl. He sits opposite, forearms on the table, and no one else looks surprised. He sets down a little stack of those cards already freckled with pencil. "You're out early," he says. You tell him about the microfilm, about the timestamp, and about how your brain keeps insisting it hears a vending machine coil click in the dark. He listens with the patience of someone who has learned to let people empty their pockets without interrupting. Then he shares what's new. A box recently logged after a storage room cleanup. Not ours, he admits. Parks and Rec held a bag of lost and found from summer 2001 that apparently never made it to the sheriff's office. A jacket, a pair of sunglasses, a souvenir keychain shaped like the lake, and 3 hair ties woven together like a tiny friendship belt. And in the bag's corner, a coin roll with 4 quarters missing. You feel your pulse in your wrist at quarter time. He's careful not to call it evidence. He says, items, says will be examined, says might be nothing, and you appreciate the way he refuses to bend nouns into wishes. He mentions the padlock scrape at the Parks and Rec shed before you can. He says, could be kids. He says, could be someone who wants us to think kids. He says, when you stare long enough. The lake makes faces. You both sip coffee that has cooled into a different beverage and pretend you like it. Here's the odd thing you can't shake. And the detective admits, he can't either. In the lost and found bag, there was a slip of paper folded down to the size of a postage stamp. Unfolded gently, it turned out to be a clean, unfilled library hold notice from 2001. The kind clerks used to tuck into books with a date stamped on the top line and a blank space below for the patron's name. This one had only the date, the very week you just scanned on microfilm, and a faint, greasy oval where a thumb once pressed. It shouldn't mean anything. It makes you feel like the story just turned its head to look at you directly. Afternoon light composes itself into slats. You walk with the detective to the pavilion again. The two of you, a slow procession of ordinary shoes and tired questions. He shows you chalk marks he made where a camera will go. He tells you he's filed the paperwork to test the items, to photograph and bag what should have been photographed and bagged long ago. He tells you about a volunteer who's offered to digitize the old 911 recordings so they're easier to search. And you make a mental note to bring donuts to that person because sometimes gratitude needs sugar to land. As you stand near the restroom building, you watch a school bus drop off kids for a summer program. They spill out with the weightlessness of people who have never waited for an answer for 24 years. One boy runs to the vending machine near the playground and presses his face to the glass, considering his choices as if life's most urgent decisions happen in front of coils and chips. You swallow, and the detective pretends not to notice. He changes the subject to something less, or maybe more, tender. The ethics of new tools. He says it in the soft way people discuss weather, but you hear the weight of it, whether to use forensic genetic genealogy with whatever might be left from that week, whether to enter a narrow corridor of third cousins once removed and trees with missing branches, whether to ask a community to tolerate the uncomfortable intimacy of science that can resurrect a stranger's proximity. You stand in the shade and acknowledge that there's an ongoing debate in criminology and law. Call it privacy versus public safety. Call it consent versus consequence, about whether the right to quiet ancestry should bend when quiet becomes a wall. You don't resolve it. You both just breathe. You bank a few more truths without naming them as such. The bench by the boat launch was installed the summer after the girl went missing. The bronze plaque is dedicated to still waters, which feels like a kindness, trying its best. The motel replaced the carpet in 2009 after a pipe burst. The manager saved one square as a joke, he could tell, but he keeps it in a shoebox, like something holy. The ranger you haven't found yet bought coffee at the diner that night. The waitress kept the receipt because she keeps everything, not because she foresaw that a slip of thermal paper could become a relic. You head to the Grange even though it's not rummage day yet, The side door is unlocked because small towns operate on polite faith. The hall smells like lemon oil and the faint memory of pancakes. On a bulletin board near the kitchen, hand-lettered recipes are pinned with thumbtacks that have lost their colored caps, leaving just raw metal circles like tiny moons. You stand there and imagine women you don't know whisking batter, men you don't know folding chairs, kids you don't know sliding across the waxy floor in their socks, and laughter folding over and over itself like dough. You add the Grange to your map because the party in 2001 moved there when the rain got too heavy, and something trivial, someone's phone charger, someone's borrowed hoodie made a small detour that a big story forgot to follow. On your way out, you notice the lost and found basket by the door, a collection of scarves, a single mitten, a glittery headband, and one key with a blue plastic cap. You aren't a detective. You're not allowed to bag and tag, but you snap a mental photo anyhow because coincidence has a way of waving and then walking off if you pretend not to see it. Late afternoon, you walk the path by the highway where the hazard lights blinked in memory. The ditch is dry now, sprigged with tough weeds, and a crushed paper cup partway flattened into the shape of a white flower. You kneel and touch the dirt. It's powder fine at the surface, then cooler and packed an inch below. A cake with layers. You stand and watch traffic. You realize the angle from which a person at the boat launch might see a truck at the shoulder is different from what you always pictured. You adjust your mental camera again. You feel a little better, as if you've relieved a pressure valve you didn't know was stuck. You drift to the hardware store at closing time. The air smells of lumber and twine and the good honesty of new rubber. The owner nods. He remembers everyone. He selects screws for you that he knows you don't need, just to have an excuse to talk. He mentions, without being prompted, without drama, that the man in the windbreaker once bought a padlock here, the kind with the cover, he says, miming a rubber flap that shields the keyhole from rain. He said he was sick of rust. Then he shakes his head like someone who has already scolded himself for remembering late. You thank him and step onto the sidewalk, just as the sky decides to perform. The clouds bruise purple. The lake catches fire in streaks that lie to you in the most beautiful way. You head back toward the pavilion because that's where the day wants you to end. And on the way, you pass the church where a hand-lettered sign says, "Coffee and quiet wed, 7 p.m." You think, not for the first time, that a town survives because of those two things in that order. You arrive as the detective is taping off the area where the Parks and Rec shed sits. He has approval now. He works with a deliberate calm that makes you trust the floor under your feet. You stay outside the tape and become an observer, which is a role you know. You let your breath match the sound of the lake. You narrow your focus to small motions, and you allow details to introduce themselves. A silverfish darting away from light. A tiny tear in the shed's weather strip. The way dust floats upward when a door opens, not down, as if trying to return to a story it prefers. They find what looks like nothing at first. A little cluster of grit next to the lowest hinge. A crescent of scraped paint on the inside of the door, consistent with the fresh diagonal scrape outside. And under a workbench, 2 coins fused by something sugary into a single double moon. A lemon lime soda, maybe. You don't say it. You don't need to. The detective bags them like the most precious relics of an ordinary day. His face does that thing certain faces do when they've moved from waiting to working. His features settle, like a sheet being smoothed. Night noses in. The soundscape shifts, frogs set their metronomes. Distant tires add bass. And somewhere, a screen door claps like a hand. You stand under the pavilion lights, the modern bulbs bright enough to erase shadows. You think about how, in 1966, a Supreme Court decision made it mandatory for police to inform suspects of their rights, giving us the rhythm we can recite even from TV. You have the right to remain silent. The words are a spell and a promise and a seatbelt. You utter them in your head now, like a charm for whatever the next days bring. As you prepare to leave, A teenager on a bike glides past, earbuds in, head tipped back. He takes a look at the lake the way only someone who grew up here can. Straight on, affection without ceremony. You hear they drained the north culvert last week. He tosses toward you without slowing. Found like 8 baseballs and a shoe. He rides on, and you add a culvert to your map and a shoe to your list, and realize how wide this town is when you're trying to see every small left-of-center thing. On your way home, you pass the motel just as the vacancy flickers again, undecided. The manager is outside smoking the vapor version of a cigarette and scrolling. He nods at you and then, as if he has been waiting the whole day to say it, adds softly, "Storm like that night?" The lights pop in a pattern. Every third room blinks. Always did. We kept a spare bulb in 103 because of it. You ask which room belongs to 103 now, even though you don't plan to knock. He points, and your eyes do the rest, making a rectangle in your mind that becomes a window. And behind that window, a small shape. And then the shape is only a memory you'll carry like a postcard with no address. At home, you stand in your doorway a while before you turn on the lamp. Your fan adds its soft hush to the room, like a promise it intends to keep. You lay out your yellow card equivalents on your kitchen table, the ticket stub from a carnival the week after the party, the note you wrote about the library hold slip, and the times you cannot help but write down even if the clock keeps forgiving you. You draw the lake from memory, then draw the culvert, then draw a dotted line between the vending machine and the shed just because dots help you remember the distance between things. You catch yourself smiling at the absurdity and the bravery of this, at your own kitchen table covered with snack wrappers and serious questions. You think of the academic arguments you've eavesdropped on about memory's unreliability in rain, about flashbulb recollections that feel crisp but are fogged at the edges, about how the brain will trade accuracy for narrative cohesion because stories are the way we survive. You think of how this town has lived inside its own necessary story for 2 decades and how gently you want to carry it while it learns a new one. Before sleep, you step outside to check the sky and make sure the world still holds. A neighbor's sprinkler sets a rhythm. Somewhere far off, a train threads its long needle through the dark. You close your eyes and picture the vending coil at rest, the shed lock relatched, the culvert with its secret baseballs and orphaned shoe, the Grange with its recipes pinned by moon-like tacks, and the library with its humming machine coaxing shapes from film. You picture a hand reaching for a lemon lime and stopping mid-air, as if waiting for permission from a future that is finally ready to answer. You don't know yet what Act 3 will bring. You only know you'll wake up and take one more step left of the big thing, and the town, tentative, hopeful, will step with you. Morning tastes like copper and paper. The sky's been rinsed clean overnight clouds, flattened into ribbons. The kind of quiet brightness that makes everything look honest, whether it wants to or not. You lace your shoes, button your jacket, and step into the air that still remembers mist. Today, the detective said, the county team would run a small dredge along the north culvert, just maintenance, officially. But in this town, maintenance often means curiosity dressed as duty. You walk there on autopilot, the road lined with cattails taller than your shoulders. The hum of insects is relentless, electric. Your coffee has gone lukewarm by the time you reach the chain-link fence, where 2 orange cones mark the edge of the work zone. The detective waves, clipboard in hand, a smile that's more crease than curve. You both know not to expect anything. You both do it anyway. The culvert mouth gapes like an old mouth missing teeth. A concrete oval with moss growing in cursive lines. A small backhoe squats nearby, its scoop raised, mud flecked across its steel like freckles. 2 workers in reflective vests move with the casual rhythm of men used to finding garbage bottles, cans, a bike frame or 2. The first bucket lifts out water thick as soup and dumps it into a sorting bin. The smell is ancient. Algae, silt, a memory of gasoline. You watch, heart steady, mind whispering that this is probably nothing. The third scoop glints. Something metallic catches light before the mud slides off. One of the workers swears under his breath and signals for the detective. You step closer because you can't not. The bucket tilts, and there it is. A shape no bigger than a lunchbox. Edges softened by time, still closed by a corroded latch. The detective exhales through his nose, slow and measured, and gestures for evidence gloves. You listen to the plastic snap around his wrists, the sound crisp against the squelch of mud. He sets the box on a tarp, wipes away the thickest grime, and frowns at a faded sticker blue and green, maybe waves once printed there. A souvenir from the lake shop, you realize. Inside, coins rattle faintly when he tilts it. He opens the latch with a pocket knife tip, and the hinge gives with a sigh. Inside, a handful of quarters dulled to gray, 2 Polaroid photos warped by moisture, and a plastic keychain shaped like the lake, the same style found in that Parks and Rec bag. The photos are stuck together at the corners. He separates them gently. The first shows the pavilion mid-party. Fairy lights strung, faces blurred by motion. Someone mid-laugh with rain beginning to streak across the lens. The second, you lean closer. A truck. A green windbreaker barely visible in the driver's window. And on the windshield, refracted in rain and flash. A face you can't quite place. Half obscured. Familiar. Like a dream you never finished having. The detective doesn't speak for a long time. He holds both photos at arm's length, comparing angles, his thumb trembling slightly. Then he places them in separate bags, marks the time, and gives the clipboard to the worker. You step back. The earth soft under your shoes. Around you, the cattails sway, as if gossiping. You remember something trivial but true. The first Polaroid camera was sold commercially in 1948. A revolution of immediacy. Instant evidence. Instant memory. You think about that. The desire to freeze what we see before it can betray us. But even instant film bleeds at the edges. Even proof softens over time. By afternoon, the news has whispered its way across town. The diner hums louder. People linger in line at the hardware store just to ask casual questions. The waitress tells you she heard it was a cooler, not a box. The librarian says she read there was jewelry inside. The manager at the motel claims the detective found a whole camera roll. Everyone edits the truth in real time, the way memory does when it wants comfort more than clarity. You sit in your car outside the station, watching the blinds shift as people come and go. You know the process. The photos will be stabilized, scanned, and cross-checked. Faces will be compared. Someone will mention an old suspect who moved states years ago and another who passed away last winter. And still, in this kind of story, time behaves like a magnet. It pulls every loose nail back to the same point. Evening folds over the lake like silk. You walk the path one last time. The pavilion lights buzz faintly. Insects orbiting each bulb in mad devotion. You pause by the rail and look out. The surface holds the reflection of a sky so calm it feels scripted. The detective joins you quietly, paper cup of coffee in his hand. They match the prints on the keychain, he says. Voice low. Vang lang long. Vang lang long. Partial, but good enough. It belonged to the guy who worked maintenance that summer. He lived 3 blocks from the motel. You know the one. You nod. You do. The man with the green windbreaker. The one everyone stopped naming because the years made silence easier. He died in 2011, the detective adds. Heart attack. Wife moved away. She turned in some of his things last month. Said she found a box of photos but figured they were from fishing trips. We compared them. Same Polaroid film type. Same time period. He sips. Winces. At the bitterness. So, it's over? You ask. The detective tilts his head. Over enough, he says. You stand there together, the wind gentle but deliberate, pushing a ripple across the lake's skin. Somewhere downshore, a loon calls a long, hollow note that sounds like a question you can't translate. Here's the strange detail that will never make the official report. After they cleared the culvert, the vending machine by the playground stopped jamming. Kids can buy lemon lime again. The coils spin cleanly, obediently. A silly thing, a coincidence. But you catch yourself smiling anyway. Some mysteries unwind in small mercies. And yet, the scholars of stories, those invisible professors inside your mind, would argue this: closure is a myth of narrative convenience. Every solved case leaves ghost data behind. Every neat ending sprouts unseen roots. Maybe that's true. Maybe peace isn't about knowing who, but about forgiving the waiting itself. You walk home through streets that seem lighter, as if the lamplight found its courage back. Curtains flutter. Dogs bark without purpose. The air carries rain again, faint and metallic. When you reach your porch, you pause. The night feels the same and completely changed, like a record replayed on a better turntable. Inside, your fan hums faithfully. You sit at the table where your notes still lie. Maps, sketches, and yellow cards. You stack them carefully, aligning corners, and breathe out a long-held sigh. You think of the girl's best friend with the sodas. You think of the quarters in the vending coil. You think of all the people who lived entire lives under the weight of a question, finally given an answer too late to rearrange the past. You whisper into the quiet, "It's done." And for the first time, the lake in your mind stops rippling. Let's slow down together now. The story has ended, but the echo remains, drifting across the water like mist that doesn't want to leave just yet. You can feel the night cooling against your skin, a soft brush, a reminder that the world keeps breathing even when you stop to listen. The hum of your fan becomes the lake's lullaby. The air tastes faintly of metal and memory. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture the pier empty now, washed in pale moonlight. The boards creak under the gentlest wind, but it's a kind sound, one that keeps rhythm with your heartbeat. Somewhere, an owl calls once, then falls silent. You imagine its wings folding into the dark, the soft geometry of rest. In your mind, the water glows faintly silver. Ripples spread, slow and patient, each one carrying the weight of an unanswered question until the surface stills again. You think of all the lives touched by a single night, how stories dissolve into one another until only their warmth remains. You breathe slower. The fan's hum blends with your breath. The light in the room softens. Edges blur. You are not in the town anymore, but you carry its quiet in your chest, a hush shaped like forgiveness. The world outside narrows to the softest possible sound, the whisper of night against glass, the memory of a storm that has finally passed. Maybe someday we'll know the truth. But for now, sleep well.